You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com.
Picture this. You step out onto a street in India, and in front of you stands a building that, at first glance, looks abandoned. Now, what's your first thought? Chaos, maybe? That's exactly what I expected before embarking on a 33-hour flight to India. Hollywood and global headlines love to paint India as a land of noise and confusion, but is that the real story? Let me tell you, after 2 weeks here, my entire perspective flipped on its head. Beneath the surface chaos lies a self-organizing energy pool of innovation that powers this country's transformation, neighborhood by neighborhood. Why do we see only one side? Partly, it's the statistics numbers without context. But, as I quickly learned, India can't be captured by a single data point or a movie trope. It's vast, diverse, and endlessly surprising. Now, you might be thinking, isn't the average income here shockingly low? Yes, but that's just one lens. What if I told you a salary considered elite by Indian standards would barely register as middle class in New York? This is where the story gets interesting. So today, I'm going to break down the India you don't see, the tech boom, the lifestyle shifts, and the realities behind those numbers. Stick with me, because this journey will challenge everything you think you know about one of the world's most dynamic countries. Ready to walk through the streets of Bengaluru, Chennai, and beyond? Let's dive right in. Let's get real with some numbers. The average adult in India makes about $2,600 per year. That's just $220 a month. Shocking, right? But here's where it gets fascinating. I once hired a talented designer from India whose expected salary was 40. That's nearly double the national average, and yet, in tech circles, it's just the starting point. Now, you might ask, how can people live comfortably on $220 a month? Here's the twist: cost of living is dramatically lower. Groceries are up to 70% cheaper than in the US. In fact, a $250 monthly salary can get you a decent car and cover daily commutes. But there's more. That elite bracket of earners, those making tech salaries numbers over 130 million people, that's larger than entire countries. So, while averages tell one story, the lived reality is far more nuanced. Let me tell you a story. When I first saw those salary stats, I couldn't wrap my head around them. But talking to locals, I realized that a so-called high salary means something very different here than it does in the West. Two key terms here: PPP, or purchasing power parity, which measures what your money buys locally, and income distribution, how wealth is spread. Both matter if you want to make sense of India's economic puzzle. Here's a question. Why are so many tech companies coming out of India? Is it just cheap labor, or is there something deeper at play? Let's peel back the curtain. India graduates thousands of software engineers every year, many from elite institutions like the IITs. These grads are snapped up by startups offering transformative salaries, sometimes up to 2 crore rupees per year. That's about 240. Not bad, right? But the real magic is in the ecosystem. You've got a massive talent pool, a culture that values education, and cities like Bengaluru and Chennai turning into tech hubs. It's a perfect storm for innovation. Now, skeptics might say, isn't this just a bubble? But let's not forget the network effect, a term from economics, meaning that each new participant makes the system more valuable. That's exactly what's happening here. So, whether it's payment apps tailored for local needs or SaaS platforms competing globally, Indian startups are reshaping the market from the inside out. If you've ever wondered where the heart of India's tech revolution beats, look no further than Bengaluru and Chennai. These cities are more than just urban centers, they're living laboratories for change. Bengaluru, often called the Silicon Valley of India, is home to coffee shops and co-working spaces buzzing with founders, developers, and investors. In 2021 alone, India saw the birth of 46 new unicorn startups worth over $1 billion each, and a huge chunk came from these cities. But here's the conflict. Gleaming tech parks stand side by side with underdeveloped streets and humble shops. I remember passing by a modern IT campus only to find a crumbling building right next door, both full of life. Audience, have you ever seen such stark contrasts up close? It's jarring, but it's also a sign of rapid transformation. This juxtaposition modernity next to tradition is what makes these cities unique. They're not just following a Western blueprint, they're inventing their own path. You might have heard of India's tier system for cities. But what does it really mean, and why does it matter for tech? Officially, cities are classified from Tier 1 to Tier 6 based on population and infrastructure. Tier 1 cities think Mumbai, Bengaluru magnets for talent and investment. Tier 3 or 4 towns, on the other hand, often struggle with access to opportunities. Now, here's the conflict. While thousands flock to big cities for tech jobs, millions remain in smaller towns. This creates a sharp dividend not just in income, but in exposure to technology and global culture. Let me ask you, did you grow up in a place where tech could change your life? For many in Tier 3 cities, that's still a distant dream. This digital divide, a term for gaps in access to computers and the internet, remains a major challenge. But it's also an opportunity for entrepreneurs to bridge these gaps with innovative solutions. Here's a reality check. In India, education isn't just important, it's everything. The pressure to get into a top university is intense, and the stakes are sky high. Let me share a story. I met students who started working in tech before they even graduated, but the competition is fierce. Private universities charge high fees, sometimes 6 times what they did just a decade ago. Now, you might ask, why is there so much emphasis on engineering and tech? It's simple, these fields offer a ticket to upward mobility in a country where the gap between rich and poor is vast. But here's the challenge. Not everyone can afford elite education. The meritocracy myth, the idea that anyone can rise purely on talent, collides with the reality of unequal access. So, while tech jobs are transformative, they remain out of reach for many. Solving this will be key to India's future growth. Let's talk lifestyle. What does a life-changing salary mean in India? You might be surprised. A tech salary of 40 or even 40 a year, astronomical by local standards, allows for luxuries many in the West take for granted. Think about having a driver, a nanny, or a cook services accessible to most professionals here. But, as always, there's a catch. The cost of groceries is low, but tuition and property prices are soaring in the big cities. So, while high earners create bubbles of affluence, they also drive up costs for everyone else. Now, you might wonder, does this create resentment? Absolutely. The contrast between tech-driven prosperity and everyday struggles is visible on every street corner. 2 technical terms to remember: inflation, the rise in prices over time, and gentrification, wealthier residents changing the character of a neighborhood. Both are at play in India's booming tech cities. So, how do these new incomes change Indian culture? Let me take you inside a dining room in Chennai. Eating out, for instance, was rare just a generation ago. It was seen as a necessity for travelers, not a lifestyle choice. But today, tech workers frequent cafes and restaurants, blending global tastes with local flavors. But here's the tension. Even as Western habits take root, deep traditions remain. Most families still prioritize savings, especially for buying a home, which is a universal aspiration here. Now, you might be thinking, is this cultural change happening everywhere? Far from it. In smaller cities, old habits die hard and the tech boom hasn't fully penetrated. This collision of old and new is what makes India so fascinating, and it's reshaping daily life in ways statistics can't capture. Let's tackle a tough topic: inequality. India is one of the world's most unequal countries, and the gap is widening as tech booms. On one side, you have engineers and entrepreneurs earning life-changing salaries, buying homes, saving aggressively. On the other, millions still live on a few dollars a day. I witnessed this firsthand, a luxury apartment complex rising next to crowded slums in the same city block. The contrast is jarring, but it's also a byproduct of rapid economic growth. Now, some argue that this inequality is a necessary stage in development, the so-called Kuznets curve, which suggests inequality rises before it eventually falls as a country gets richer. But the question remains, how can India harness its tech success to lift everyone, not just the lucky few? Let's look ahead. India is on track to become the world's most populous country, with a median age under 30. That's millions of young, ambitious minds entering the workforce every year. This demographic dividend, meaning a large, young population, offers a once-in-a-generation opportunity for explosive growth, especially in tech. But with opportunity comes responsibility. The challenge will be to provide quality education, meaningful jobs, and an inclusive path forward for all. Now, you might ask, could India really become the next Silicon Valley? The ingredients are there: talent, ambition, and a unique knack for Jugaad making the most out of limited resources. With the right investments in people and infrastructure, India's tech-powered future could transform not just this country, but the world. The journey is just beginning.